My name's Russell from Plant Resources, and we're here just to, have a chat in the first of our series about areas of specialisation that you can go into within the broad planning, design, engineering space. We're really pleased to have Kirsty Kelly, who's the CEO of AITPM, with us today to discuss, all things transport, the transport planning, modelling, etc. So, welcome, Kirsty. I guess initially, if you'd like to, tell us a bit about yourself and AITPM as an organisation.
Thanks, Russell. It's great to be able to have a chat with you today about the range of fields within transport and career options there. I have been with AITPM for 3 years, and it's a fascinating organisation, and transport is a really broad field with a range of different disciplines and career and job options within it for different sorts of people. So, as an organisation, we see the range of disciplines in transport, from the people doing the strategic transport planning right up front, setting policy with government around where our transport should be placed, what sort of transport needs we have for our growing communities, major infrastructure, those kinds of things, through to people working in developments, working across with engineers and town planners to design the more detailed road and public transport and active travel routes in communities, people working in local government and private sector, auditing road safety and making sure that our transport routes and connections are safe and efficient, and even modelling, which is a field that helps to understand what's happening with transport movements, whether that's road and vehicles, but also pedestrians and cycles, to use models to identify where we need to grow and change infrastructure. So transport is a really broad field, lots of different options for people in this space.
Yeah, cool. Well, I guess probably as a starting question, because it's so broad, if I was a young person looking at degree options or whatever, is there a set way of getting into that industry, or how do you enter that industry initially?
So there aren't generally specific transport degrees. So transport comes connected to degrees like engineering or through town planning. So if you go into an urban and regional planning course, you can start to specialise in transport planning through that, and likewise in engineering there's often transport or traffic electives that you can choose, but there isn't generally specific undergraduate transport courses. There are some master's options, so people can move into that area. What we find though is that people will study some of those base degrees and then have an interest in how people move and connect. Often it happens when they start out working in a firm, and then they'll end up looking at or working on some transport type projects and then start to specialise in that area. So it often comes from people that have a real interest in whether they're a cyclist or whether they love buses and trains and planes, and that's how they'll often end up in transport. In the modelling side, which is much more systems and data thinking, people come into that if they're often working in mathematics or economics, and so again, but perhaps often have a personal interest or bent towards transport. Is how they end up in this area. So you can come into transport as a field from a range of different courses, and get working in an organisation through that.
I guess any tips on, because it's so broad and you're going to get so many people coming at it from different ways, any tips in terms of how you're going to prove you're genuinely interested in that space?
Yeah, so if you haven't worked in transport before, it's always good to try and get some experience in some way, and certainly for a person that's perhaps a newer graduate that's come out of an engineering or a planning degree, and they're looking to get a job in this area. I think it's just genuine, demonstrating at a personal level your interest in it and your understanding and commitment to the importance of transport and connectivity, because it really is a sort of a key, transport is a key facet in everyone's life. It's how we access, work, school, health facilities, shopping, how you move for recreation through active travel. So, understanding how important that is. So, if you were, a graduate putting in a job application and you were looking at transport, I think, but you haven't had any experience in it yet, then certainly even just talking about your understanding of why it's important would help.
Yeah. So, and I suppose some people will think about transport and you think about cars, and I suppose I don't want to say dirty side of it, but I suppose there's a big shift these days in the younger generation to look at that social climate change responsibility in terms of how that plays out within the industry. Is that something you see?
Yeah, look, it's a huge area at the moment. So a big focus across the industry, and certainly even within AITPM, is around decarbonisation and active travel. So decarbonisation, active travel certainly assists with decarbonisation, but in the decarbonisation side of things, it's looking at electric vehicles and other types of fuel vehicles. There's a lot of work going on around how to encourage people to travel in different ways, or to work, and again working across with the planning side in terms of how our cities and regions are structured so that people don't need to drive as much, or can access what they need through different means to reduce the amount of vehicle travel, but also looking at, with vehicle travel, doing that in a way that reduces emissions. So our members will often be working on projects related to reduction in transport emissions, whether that be through working at the types of vehicles that we're using, or the routes, or that sort of policy change for how people move. And then likewise, things like active travel and micro-mobility is a huge one at the moment. And it's one that a lot of states are grappling with around, how do you deal with e-scooters and e-bikes, and what does that mean for safety? Is that still active if people aren't really pedaling hard? It's really... it's fascinating. There's lots of stuff going on in this space, and particularly for perhaps younger people that are really passionate about addressing climate change and looking at these issues. There's great opportunities to work in transport and actually make a real difference to improving the environment.
Yeah, and I get in terms of then how people's careers develop longer term. Do they then specialise, or can they specialise within that? Let's say e-scooters could they become a scooter specialist, or is it more sort of broader, generic, or I guess how would someone specialise their career?
Yeah, look, there's both options are available. So it can be very broad, and you can work across a range of different things, either sort of, across the course of a year or across the course of your career. You can wind through different aspects of transport, or you can specialise. So certainly we've got a number of many people in the industry that's focusing on particular areas that they're interested in, and certainly things like the micro mobility and decarbonisation are ones that we're seeing a lot of people focusing in on key aspects of that at the moment. There's also quite a bit of research going on in that space. So, there are scholarships and things that are available, and you see people working in that research and practice connection side to understand, how do we better leverage the opportunity for using things like micro-mobility to address climate change, but also manage, safety and risk at the same time. So, as a career option, working in transport gives you a broad range of areas that you can work in over the life of your career, and you can stay broad, or you can specialise, or you can do a bit of both depending on how you feel at the time.
And if you were to if you had a crystal ball and were to say, well, look, the areas that you think over the next 5-10 years, if you're starting your career out there, the areas that you really think are going to grow, what would you say those specialisms will be?
Look, I think it'll be around a lot of local travel issues, so around active travel, converting our transport routes to pick up different types of vehicles with sort of fuel vehicle changes. I think the other part is, while I'm sure there'll still be lots of big infrastructure projects, I think we're also moving into a phase where we need to do more with less. So it will be around how to make better use of the infrastructure that we have to get better outcomes, transport outcomes, and accessibility and sustainability outcomes out of the transport infrastructure that we have. And some of that is through travel behaviour change. So, changing the way that people are moving. And COVID's been a massive catalyst for transport change, probably a bigger catalyst than anything we've had in decades. And one of those things that, we prior to COVID, there would have been lots of programs around trying to encourage people to, change their journey to work and those kind of things. And COVID has done that, almost overnight, with people travelling into the city less for work, moving differently, and that changes the demand for travel and congestion. So, in terms of the areas for focus and the growth, I think it's going to be probably less on big infrastructure projects and more on how to work with what we've got to modify and adapt and create better opportunities for people to move and connect within their communities. On a larger scale, it's also regional transport will still be really critical, and some major rail projects and things like that in regional areas are important, and how to move large quantities of goods, freight and what have you to ports and to cities.
Yeah. When you're talking about things like behavioural change, obviously that's a long way away from what you'd think a traditional engineer does as part of their role. So does that, again, if we go back to that, I guess, sort of type of personality that maybe suits that role, does that mean it's a non-traditional sort of person you're looking for again, or?
Look, it can be. It also is people coming from backgrounds other than engineering. And that's what, across transport, we've got people from a range of different perspectives. I think what's interesting that we're seeing, and I think COVID has also helped with this, where people are examining their own travel patterns a bit more, even as professionals and practitioners, because they're making choices about where they work and live, and how they're moving around their communities. So, I think there might still be some sort of traditional professionals, but I think that the sort of stereotypical engineer or planner or modeler has, it's not altogether gone, but I think it's definitely changed, and people are adapting more to the different environments that we've got going on.
Yeah.
So things like travel behaviour change, that, and we have different experts that come in from, fields of psychology and even, sort of sales people that come in and help to guide, what those different user experiences are, how to encourage people to travel in different ways. And certainly a lot of community engagement is involved in transport, and those sort of getting a better understanding of people and what they need and want and how they make their decisions. So less focused on it being transport solutions being all about an engineer designing and building something and then people using it, but more focus on what people's needs are in the first place, how they're going to move, and designing things that will work with that, and being able to adapt over time. Because I think if COVID's taught us anything, is that we need to adapt. So that's.
I guess while we're on the C word, in terms of a lot of sort of candidates that we're seeing when they're looking at industries, they want to know, I guess, how COVID affected that industry and how it fared during COVID. As an industry as a whole, how did you guys go through COVID?
Industry as a whole has grown during COVID, so the demand for transport projects and work in transport has grown. Certainly in the early days when everyone was kind of locked down at home, things were at a bit of a standstill for a little while, and particularly in parts of our industry that include, because our industry includes that, the organisations and people that go out there counting traffic count, doing all of that movement, that certainly slowed. But overall, through COVID, the industry has continued to be, quite busy, and it's certainly very busy at the moment.
Yeah. And if you were to look, because obviously you pick up the papers every day and it's bad news, all sorts of economic depression, so I guess in terms of how you would see the next 18 months if we do slow down, is that going to affect sort of the transport sector massively or not? Or
look, I don't think it is going to massively affect the transport sector. I think there's a significant pipeline of projects already in the wings, and with that, it's also that, as I sort of mentioned before, the doing more with less. It's still, I think there'll still be a lot of people working on a range of projects. It might be about less construction, but more around changing the things that we're doing with what we have.
Yeah, which is that smaller, less thing again that you're sort of referring to. How, probably slightly left field question, but obviously a lot of that, if we're looking at that younger cohort, a lot of those people will also be asking us questions like, well, how transferable are those skills? If we look at planning, it's obviously quite legislative based and therefore can tie you to a state or a country. In terms of the broader transport sector, can they take those skills to wherever, or how does it fare?
Yeah, look, it's very transferable, state to state and even internationally. So, we have quite a lot of members that come and people working in the industry that come from overseas, and likewise people here that go and work overseas. So it is very transferable, and certainly moving around within states. There's definitely, there are some local, particularly in the very specific parts of some of the traffic engineering, we're dealing with some local standards in parts.
Yep.
Parking requirements and things will vary from state to state, and in some jurisdictions even from council to council, so there'll be some different things that they'll work with, but it's one of those things that's very transferable from state and territory to state and territory, and also overseas.
Yeah, cool. And I guess probably as a final one from my point of view, in terms of the AITPM, how do people get involved in it? What's the
Yeah, so look, AITPM is the sort of home of the transport community. So anyone working in transport can be involved. You don't have to have a certain degree or even have that transport experience yet to be involved. You just have to be interested in transport. So we encourage people to join and come along to the events. We run quite a lot of technical events. So and the beauty of COVID is that we're doing a lot more webinars now, so it's accessible to people. And all of that's available on demand for members as well, so they can, if you have someone that joins the transport field and needs to get up to speed on what all this transport stuff is, they can join AITPM and jump on and view hundreds of hours of webinars and content to get a feel for what's happening. We also do a lot of networking events in each of the main states in particular, and social events as well. Part of transport's actually it's a very friendly community of practitioners and professionals. So, we run a range of events in different locations, even things with our young professionals and trivia nights and what have you, so that people can, meet other people and really engage and feel part of that transport community.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you for your time today, and thanks again.
Thank you.